Venus and star blessings. How you doing, everybody? It's been a little while since I've seen you, and I'm really glad to be back. So today I want to talk about the new moon in Pisces, which is coming up in a couple of days' time. Quite a weird energy, actually. Before I go to that, I just want to say, I posted on Greg Braden's Facebook wall because he asked a question, and the question was, what piece of advice or piece of wisdom, whatever you want to call it, has been really valuable to you through your life? If it was one thing, what would it be? And so I wrote, the stars don't lie, people do. And I saw today that he actually acknowledged my comment, because this was a couple of days ago, and I was really pleased with that, because he's somebody that I, highly respect, highly value, and highly appreciate. So it was wonderful for him to see my comment and to actually acknowledge it. And I've been thinking about that statement a lot lately. The stars don't lie, people do, because it is fundamentally true. So that is going to be an important statement when we look at this new moon in a moment, and I'll explain why. Before I jump into that, there's just something that I'd like to share with you guys very, very briefly, which I will explore with you guys at a later stage in much more depth and detail as we get closer to it. And what I'm referring to is the Saturn Neptune conjunction that will get very close in Pisces next year, but will not perfect in the sign of Pisces. It will perfect at 0 degrees of Aries in 2026. This is a really big deal. I wrote a post on my Facebook wall the other day saying there's an alignment coming up that has only occurred once in 2,000 years. Once only. And it is actually Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees of a cardinal sign. Not the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, because that happens every 35, 36 years. But at a 0 degrees cardinal sign, that has only happened once in the last 2,000 years. That is a really, really, really super big deal. For those of you that understand astrology and understand the power of the cardinal cross, the 0 degrees of the cardinal signs, you will understand that that is quite a phenomenal, revolutionary, revelational, huge critical point in the world, period, for the entire world. The cardinal points are very potent points on the wheel, and generally speak to really extreme shifts and changes. So that's what it is, for those of you that were wondering, that follow me on Facebook, where I made a statement that there is an alignment coming up that has only occurred once in 2,000 years. And by the way, that one time that it has occurred in 2,000 years, okay, was in the 1700s at 0 degrees of Cancer. So, we'd have to explore what was going on in that time to get some sort of a sense, historically and so forth, of perhaps what it's going to speak to this particular time that it arrives. It's a really, it's quite mind-blowing, really. In 2,000 years, it's only occurred once at a 0 degree cardinal sign. So that's what that was, and I will come back to speak to that at a later stage. And it was actually 1738, for those of you that are curious, on the 2nd of July, and it was Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Cancer. Okay, the cardinal points are a big deal, and the upcoming one in 2026 is at the beginning of the wheel, 0 degrees Aries. It's going to be a really important alignment, without question. Okay, so the new moon is really, really interesting and bizarre all at the same time, because it is encapsulated between these two planets, Saturn and Neptune. You know, Saturn and Neptune are on either side of this new moon. The new moon is actually conjunct. Neptune on one side, Saturn on the other side. The conjunction is not too wide, by the way, because I've heard some people suggest that those planets are a little bit too far away. Not at all. First of all, a conjunction can be 15 degrees, let alone 9 or 10 or 7 or 8. Now, there are different schools of thought and people have their own approach and so forth, and that's fine. But from my perspective, my understanding, my observation over many, many years, a conjunction that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, even 12 degrees, even up to 15 is very powerful. And that's particularly because the conjunction is the most powerful aspect out of all the aspects. Every single aspect is born out of the conjunction, born out of the conjunction aspect. So we have Saturn on one side, Neptune on the other. So we have these archetypal energies that are at the complete opposite spectrums of what they inherently represent. One representing this reality, the construct of the reality that we ourselves perceive. Remember, everyone perceives a reality based on their own senses, on their own perceptions, on their own understanding, on their own knowledge base, on their own ability to, absorb data and process it and, make decisions accordingly or connect the dots accordingly. So not everyone sees everything in the same way. That's obvious, right? But in any case, Saturn for all of us does reflect our conscious construct of the reality that we perceive ourselves as individuals. So we have that on one side, which also actually speaks to separation. It speaks to restriction. It speaks to things leaving from you, from your life. Saturn is always about separation, limitation, restriction, things like that, but ultimately separation. And Neptune on the other side is the complete opposite, highlighting spirit, source, oneness, compassion, love, forgiveness, empathy, sensitivity. Now, when you combine these energies together, it can be wonderful in certain ways because there can be the ability to concrete and accomplish dreams, certain dreams and aspirations and ideals that we have. We can apply a real concrete, disciplined, realistic, approach to whatever we're trying to create, because remember, a new moon is a new cycle. It happens every month, so it's not it certainly never changes our lives, as it were, but it is always an opportune time to plant some seeds, set some intentions and so forth. And I think we can get so blasé about that language, and sometimes we can become so complacent, and we don't really take it seriously. We just we take it very lightly. But seriousness is a Saturn word. So if we're serious about planting some particular intention, it can be from the smallest thing to many different things. I guess it really comes down to how authentic we are about that intention we're setting forth, how connected and aligned we are to it ourselves, or are we just sort of saying it, but we don't really believe it, but we're just sort of saying it. I think belief is a very, very important thing, and a very tricky thing as well, because belief can create a lot of problems as well. There's that. But Saturn Neptune can be at a more challenging negative side. It can be just a utter confusion about what's really possible, what's real, and what isn't. difficult to discern reality from fantasy, reality from our projected ideals and our projected fantasies. And there can be a fine line between the two and quite a confusion about how to figure out what's what. And, I think that's a really prevalent, I think it's going to be a real problem in the world actually moving forward, especially when Saturn and Neptune conjunct, next year, and then in their true alignment and conjunction at 0 Aries in 2026, primarily because of the infinite possibilities of what can be produced through technology, and how people can hide behind their computer and create false things, whether it's a false presentation of something, whether it's a false allegation, whether it's a false whatever it is, right? People are, they have this sense of so-called security because they're not being identified or seen or confronted, if they are presenting something that's incongruent, inauthentic, and deceptive and so forth, right? It's pretty easy to sit behind your computer and just, create bullshit, basically, in other words. So I think this is going to be, a very important issue moving forward because of the level of power, of technology, and especially with AI and things like that, the amount of things that you can create and generate and reproduce, and, people stealing people's work. Like I was listening to a guy who's an author here in Australia. Somebody literally stole his whole entire book and reproduced it and started selling it. Crazy things are going on, right? So I think we are, we're at a really weird time in history for sure. And I think weird is a good word for Neptune as well, although weird is normally associated to Aquarius and Uranus, but weird is a good word for Neptune, because the influence of Neptune can be so bizarre because it can correspond to disillusionment, things that we thought were there, or we thought we saw, or we thought we understood, that were not that at all, and that's really based on our own perception and what we are tuning into, what we are perceiving, things like that. So it's a very, very tricky cycle, this one, I think, with Saturn, Neptune sitting either side. It is in Pisces, so, Pisces is at the end of the wheel, and so there is some sense of closure at the same time as a new beginning as well, which is bizarre because it sounds contradictory, but it's not, because a new moon is always some type of new beginning. A new moon carries the qualities of Aries. A new moon is an Aries sort of archetypal energy. It's the beginning of all things, or the beginning of something. And in Pisces represents the end of the wheel, and so we're having this new moon in Pisces, followed by, not so long later, we're going to have the new the new year, the astrological new year, as per the tropical zodiac, which happens around the 21st of March. So there is this sense of closure, but there's also this sense of giving birth to something as well, something new. And because there are so many planets in Pisces, in this case with new moon, we have the sun, the moon, Neptune and Saturn, all in Pisces. So we can't deny the vibration in the ether calling us into a space of greater compassion, and greater forgiveness and greater sensitivity. First of all, for ourselves, because all of us have different complex layers internally, things that we're dealing with externally, things that we've gone through, things that we're unconscious about, things that we project onto others because we are so unconscious of these things within ourselves, so on and so forth, right? So compassion must start with ourselves first. And then when we can give that compassion to ourselves, We are in a much more heart-opened, heart-centered position to give that to the world, really. I think there is a deep cry, a deep need, a deep calling from the source, you know, Neptune in Pisces conjunct this new moon, for compassion and forgiveness, because there is so much of the opposite of that going on, you know, so much aggression, so much violence, so much judgment, people trying to hurt each other, people attacking each other, and it's happening at the highest level where people's lives are literally being taken away. We all know what I'm talking about, and by the way, free Palestine. And then it's happening in much smaller scales as well, just individually in our own lives or in certain communities we may be involved in. There's a lady who follows me. I will not say her name, and I will not say the names of the people involved in this, just for confidentiality. But it is interesting that something has been happening in her life, where she's had to be brave enough to call out, let's just say, a person who's kind of like a guru figure, a very popular one. And there's been certain situations that have gone on there that have been not pleasant for her. And so she's had to be really brave and really courageous to call out an entire community, as it were. Now that's Pluto in Aquarius. We're going to see a lot of this. So I think there's two really big things here with the new moon in Pisces: compassion, sensitivity, giving, because the opposite to that is the Virgo polarity point, right? And the Virgo polarity point is being stimulated in this new moon very much by the goddess Lilith. And the goddess Lilith is a very powerful entity, a very powerful archetype that is primarily unconscious in most people. Thus, it is projected onto the world, onto an individual, onto a situation. So Virgo, being in the polarity point, in the mix here of this new moon, we have these archetypes that speak to chaos and order, right? Chaos, in a way, is Pisces, and chaos is also Lilith. Virgo is order of things, but then Pisces is the unity of all things as well. And Virgo is the criticism and judgment of things that either somebody doesn't understand, or somebody has, you know, an obsessive mindset about something that they feel they are completely right about and the other person is completely wrong about. So these are all the kind of themes that can flare up around this new moon, with this Lilith being opposite the new moon. Let me just show you guys the chart, actually. It's really a very interesting chart, because I'll just get out of that, and everything's sort of like on one side of the chart, basically, you know. So oops, let me just delete that because I didn't want on the screen. Okay. So this is a new moon for Melbourne, Australia. So obviously, based on your location, everything will change houses, right? But everything will be the same from the point of view of all these planets will be here on this one side, and then on the opposite side you'll have all these points. Well, the points that I'm using, at least, anyway. So you can see that the volume of energy is all being focused in one direction. It's a bit of a seesaw, and it seems, you know, a little bit unbalanced as well, because there's hardly anything happening over here. Look at all these signs over here. There's hardly anything going on. Everything is going on in a very concentrated area. So when you have, you know, a concentrated area and, you know, lots of planets aligned like that, there's a very potent energy. It's quite an intense energy, because they're all conjunctions. They're all, you know, something's conjunct something else, right, as it follows, as from where it starts to where it kind of ends. So there's a very potent concentration of energy in these particular archetypes over here, and especially in Pisces relative to the new moon. Now, if you were to find the exact midpoint of this new moon, the exact midpoint to the degree, it is actually the midpoint of Mercury and Saturn. So the new moon is at the midpoint of Mercury and Saturn, meaning a midpoint is the middle point between two planets. Okay, that's what a midpoint is, very simply put. So when we have something at a midpoint, a planet or a new moon or whatever it may be, I pay attention to midpoints because they are the hidden layer that often gets overlooked and can often provide some further information to us that might be useful. I think this is pretty interesting because it's Mercury, the messenger of logos, the messenger of communication, our mind. It is the left brain, the linear mind. It is all communication. It is all information. It is connecting the dots and so forth. And then you've got Saturn on the other end. So this new moon's sitting in between Mercury and Saturn. And a Mercury-Saturn aspect can be, well, it's really interesting. It depends how you want to look at it. If you were to look at the midpoint structures as per this book here, which is the combination of stellar influences by Reinhold Erberton, keeping in mind this guy, you know, wrote this book decades and decades and decades ago at a time where a lot of things were quite bleak, and he's of German origin. And it's not to say that what he's saying is incorrect, but it's not some fluffed over, you know, glossed over nice words. It really just gets straight to the core of things that most people would be very uncomfortable reading a lot of his material, actually, because it can be really, really bleak. Okay, but it is just how it's been written. So what he says about the sun being between Mercury and Saturn, he says a person with a retarded mental development, that's one aspect of this, a love of traveling, changes, separations, repeated changes of residence. So he's interpreting that more or less as a natal structure. So if you have the sun at the midpoint of Mercury, Saturn, these are some of the possible themes that could be lifelong themes for you. The moon, he says, a retarded development of mind and soul. It's pretty harsh, isn't it? Then he says a love of variety, inconstancy, the opportunity to gain abundant experience, the absorption and digestion, of many different impressions, a woman having thoughts of separation. So separation comes up in both counts, and it always does with Saturn, because Saturn corresponds to separation, things separating from each other. For example, if you had a moon-Saturn aspect in your chart, particularly a hard aspect, it would not be unusual that you were separated from your mother, you know, at a young age. Very common occurrence with the moon-Saturn aspect. So Saturn really does speak to separation. It reduces things, it limits things, and it separates things. And the retarded mental developmental comments that he's making, that some people might take offense to that, and this is not intended to offend anybody. This is language that was used, as I said, decades and decades and decades ago, whereas now some of this language used out of a context that feels more appropriate might be offensive, or someone might say, well, that's discrimination, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of different things that, you know, a lot of different ways people can respond to this language, right? It's not intended to offend, though. Let's just be clear on that. But there is something really tricky, really difficult about a Mercury-Saturn aspect. And it is common to have a Mercury-Saturn aspect where people do have problems with their mental faculty, their mental capacity, whether it's in speaking, learning in school. There's a lot of different possibilities, right? Which is why he brings up those themes. So I guess if we were to say, well, what does that mean from the point of view of this new moon, you know, and does it mean anything at all? Well, for some people it might, for others it won't. But if it does mean something for us as a way of a transit, as in a new moon cycle, where the new moon is caught between, it's caught between Neptune and Saturn, but the actual midpoint is between Mercury and Saturn. That's the actual midpoint. So there is a sense here that with this new moon, we might have a real blockage with the way we are perceiving certain situations, with our mental, how we are informing ourselves mentally with particular situations. We might just be really critical, really judgmental, or just incapable of being flexible and being understanding. You know, we're just being really rigid about something. Rigid equals Saturn, right? So perhaps this is just some food for thought to keep in mind moving forward in this cycle of this new moon, because you might be in a situation, or a situation might arise where you feel this, you know, you feel something comes up where this Saturn Mercury you know, gets triggered, gets activated, and the energy of it can be you know, a sense of feeling blocked or suppressed, or unable to communicate, or you're just seeing things in a very one-sided manner, you know, things like that. Now, of course, that can correspond to matters in your own personal life, or just in generally, you know, matters to do with the world at the moment, what's going on in the world, right? So the Neptune component to this is, yeah, it's closer than Saturn, but only just. So what's going to be the more powerful influence? I guess it depends on the individual, but in terms of proximity, Neptune is closer to the new moon than Saturn, but as I said, only by, you know, very small difference. So I guess, yeah, if somebody is more attuned to Neptune, maybe they'll pick up more on the Neptune energy. If somebody's more Saturnian, they might feel the Saturnian aspect of this a lot more, or it might be just combination of both. And as I said before, the combination of those two can be, you know, a difficult to discern between fantasy and reality based on one's ideals, or what one is projecting onto a situation, onto the world, or to another, whatever it may be. There's that. And then Rob Hands says, with the Saturn-Neptune combination, this is what he says about it: confusion about what is and what is not real, fear, pessimism, extreme self-denial or denial of the physical for reasons of self-discipline, often takes the form of chronic, non-infectious or systemic ailments, rather. The ability to bring dreams or ideals into concrete realization. So there's a combination of a few different things there, some speaking to more challenging things, and on the other hand, there's also potential as well. It just depends on you, what's going on in your life, your birth chart, where this new moon lands in your chart, how you deal with Saturn-Neptune energies. Is that energy difficult for you? Do you have an aspect between them in your birth chart? You know, there's so many things to consider. But that's essentially what he says about that particular pair. So Lilith. As you can see here, let me just highlight it in case you're not familiar with the symbols. I know most of you are, but maybe some people are not. So that's goddess Lilith at 18 degrees, virtually 19 degrees of Virgo, which places her opposite the new moon. basically about a degree away from being exactly opposite the new moon. Juno is there as well, but I'm going to leave Juno out for this one because she is an asteroid and this is an opposition. So I'd be more inclined to say Juno's a little bit too far. But Lilith is not too far. She is literally opposite this new moon. I think from a collective perspective, and I posted something about this on community section, and some of you did reply or did respond. And I just said, I feel Lilith in Virgo, which is the symbol of mother. Virgo is the symbol of mother, matter. So if you look at the Virgo symbol, it's the letter M with a line curving inward. And that has to do with the matter of things, as in mother. Mother is matter, matter is mother, as in the earth. And if you look at the Scorpio symbol, it's the same. It's an M, but it's with an arrow, you know, pointing up. That's got to do with Scorpio, so I won't unpack that. But just understand that the Virgo symbol it's like the trinity of what is it? I've just forgotten the maiden, the young girl, the maiden, and the old woman, so to speak. It's the trinity of that unfoldment of a woman's journey, you could say. That's included in this Virgo symbol as well. So what I said was, I feel Lilith in Virgo being the symbol of mother or divine mother or matter, because mother and matter are the same word, by the way. Opposing Neptune in Pisces, which is what's happening. Lilith is opposite the new moon and opposite Neptune. And Neptune is a symbol of the cosmic divine mother, cosmic ocean, the cosmic divine mother, the source to all things. Then I wrote infinite divine waters, which is Neptune, perhaps highlights the extreme imbalance and abuse of power relative to the mother on earth that are hurting the divine mother, matter, both within and externally, and not to mention the lack of compassion at inconceivable actions relative to a lot of terrible things happening to very specific people, losing their lives, mothers, children. It's also fathers, it's also men. So that sort of came up very strongly for me when I was reflecting on Lilith in Virgo, being opposite Neptune and being opposite this new moon, because the Virgo-Pisces axis actually is one of the most complex axes in the wheel. There are others that are not far behind, but certainly Virgo-Pisces is one of the more complex and more difficult axes in the chart. And they both can bring chaos and order in different ways, right? So there's clearly chaos going on the earth, isn't there? Clearly there's just deep chaos going on. And clearly there's an ever so powerful need, you know, for peace and order to arrive, right? But I think this Lilith being here opposite this new moon is just really polarizing these perhaps the projected Lilith, which is normally defined as a dark archetypal figure or energy or entity, and yes, if you go into her story and her myth, and it depends how far back you want to go. There's an archetype or a deity back in Babylonian astrology who was like a winged type of human being, kind of like demonic winged human being, that is said to also be another version of Lilith going back into Babylonian times. So it depends how far back and how deep you want to go. Lilith is very prominent in Judaism, in the Jewish mysticism teachings and so forth. Also in Christianity, in the Bible. You know, there's a lot of different ways to look at Lilith, but fundamentally, at a general sort of level, the archetype of Lilith, as I said at the very beginning, is often the dark feminine within us that is, suppressed, subsequently or consequently projected in an unhealthy manner because we have not integrated that archetype within us. Anything that we don't integrate holistically and consciously within us, it is more likely that we will project it in a fragmented, disoriented manner or way that is not based on reality, on what's real or what's truth. It's just based on our own unconscious projection, something that we are so disconnected from, so out of touch from, that the only way we can see it is to see it out there in somebody else. And that's often what happens with the Lilith archetype. She gets projected, externally. And when that's happening, you know, at a huge sort of level, whether it's a collective thing or, you know, a specific community, specific peoples and so forth, you know, it's bigger, isn't it? Because it's more emphasized, it's more intense because there's a bigger pool of people involved where that energy is being projected. So it's a very interesting thing to observe, I think, through this cycle. But fundamentally, I think it's trying to show us, because oppositions ultimately speak to illumination. They speak to being able to be more aware, be more objective. That's the wonderful thing about an opposition. When two planets are integrated that are opposite each other, or two archetypes, two divinities, when they are integrated, there's a balance and there's no need any longer to project one outside of ourselves, because oppositions, which are polarized energies, it stands that we will relate to one and we will project the other completely unconsciously. That's the trouble. It's unconscious, which is why we've always got to work on ourselves. The more we work on ourselves, the more, not that this is simple and I don't want to make it sound simple, but it is true. The more we work on ourselves, the more we can actually heal the world. So with this, you know, abundance of Pisces energy, there's so many ways it can go for us. It just depends where it is happening in our chart. You know, our level of consciousness, our ability to be tuned into this energy from our heart center and from our soul as well. That is the ability to be compassionate and empathetic and sensitive and understanding and giving. We can tune into that side of it and also, you know, work more on artistic and creative endeavors and pursuits as well, because Pisces is fertile field for creativity in different ways. You know, it's divine inspiration, right? So there's many beautiful aspects to this, but it depends on you. I mean, the flip side to that coin is massive disappointment. You're disappointed because of this, because of that, because you expected this, because you expected that. And disappointment is inevitable when Neptune is in the picture. But Saturn is there, so sometimes we have to cut our losses. We may not be happy about the situation, and I guess it's about having enough objectivity and being detached enough and conscious enough to look at a situation and ask yourself the question, okay, what am I trying to get out of this situation? What's my motivation? What's my agenda? What's the purpose of this? You know, people don't often reflect on those questions. They just act on impulse or unconscious, you know, unconscious impulses and desires where there's very little, if any, thought or reflection that's gone into their actions and their behaviors. Now, in Pisces as well, there is also a call for surrender, isn't there? Pisces, Neptune, 12th house, is where things dissolve and kind of disappear, really. They dissolve. So it is a process of things dissolving beyond how much we want to control a certain situation in our life or something we are connected to out there in the world, whatever it may be. And Pisces always, and Neptune, 12th house, comes in with something that we need to surrender to, because it's beyond our control, you see. And if we resist the surrender, we are resisting the natural, cosmic, divine order of things. And when we resist it, that's when we experience the disappointment. Sometimes the disappointment can be very, very hurtful. So it just depends, you know, you and what's going on and your life and so forth. But just finally, you know, with Neptune's presence there, there's an overwhelming sense of like really feeling, you know, the trouble of the world, you know. For those of you that are more empathetic and more sensitive, you understand this. It's kind of like where you live most of the time anyway. And so for you guys that are very sensitive, you know, really protect your energies at this time. It's a tricky thing because on the one hand, we must surrender to certain things, and on the other hand, we need to be more empathetic and compassionate and sensitive to others, but we must also protect ourselves. And I think Saturn here helps us protect ourselves as well, because Saturn is the archetype that helps us create boundaries. You know, sometimes you've got to draw the line in the sand and you've got to create a firm boundary. And that's what Saturn can be very helpful for as well. So there's a combination of things. Again, depends on you. I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to see you guys soon with more. I just really wanted to do primarily this new moon and just focus on some key points. Just one more thing I've just remembered. Apart from the opposition to Lilith, there is one favorable aspect happening here, and it's a sextile from Uranus to this new moon, very close. Like it's 16, so it's about 24 minutes, a degree and 24 minutes rather. So anyway, it's what am I saying? I had it right the first time, about 24 minutes. Very close sextile, very, very close. So sextiles, always opportunities. Uranus, freedom, liberation, freedom from the known, exhilaration, authenticity. Just think of those key words and what a sextile means relative to this new moon. Basically, Uranus is supporting this new moon in that way. So it's a very bizarre energy, because you've got Saturn, Neptune, which represent the complete antithesis to one another, holding this new moon energy. And then you've got Lilith opposite it, which can be this dark, obsessive, neurotic, judgmental, critical, unable to let shit go kind of energy, or it can be something else as well. It can be, yeah, can be something else. But going back to Uranus, Uranus is supporting this new moon. It's giving it some, a leg up, so to speak, a bit of a hand. So there might be some little breakthrough that could happen out of this cycle as well, because Uranus rules breakthroughs, and it's a sextile. Sextiles equals opportunities. So, some unexpected breakthrough can come through this cycle for you in the process of surrender, Pisces, but being realistic and clear and creating the boundaries where you need to create them as well. And then tune into the dream aspects of it, making your dreams concrete. Saturn in Pisces, making your dreams concrete, being realistic about what you're capable of doing, about your expectations. We are all limited in some kind of way. No one can have everything and do everything. No one. And if anybody tells you that, they are lying to you. It's just not true. That's why we have this thing called evolution. And we come into a particular life, we take on a particular identity and so forth to experience a certain amount of things. We don't have everything in the one life. We don't experience everything in the one life. If we did, evolution probably wouldn't exist or wouldn't take nearly as long. So the point to that part of what I just said is to remind us that we all have limitations. And we just need to accept our limitations and work and focus on what we have got, what we are good at, what we can grow and develop, what we can create, and appreciate that, really appreciate what we have, especially for those of us who are in a position that are not in the Middle East at the moment. We are so lucky. I'll never stop saying that because it's true. Let's not be ungrateful, let's be grateful for what we have, and let's give rather than try and take, Pisces, this is about giving. Open your heart. I think that's a good place to leave it. I'll see you all very, very soon, sending you all much love. Lots of Venus star blessings. Happy new moon cycle. I noticed as well that there's a comet that was photographed on the 3rd of March by this photographer that I follow. And it's really interesting. I don't know much about this comet, but having spoken to Rumen just a couple of times, I have come to understand that comets have tremendous significance when they come, close to the Earth. And their significance is based on the duration of visibility, location of visibility, length of visibility, the color that it is. They're the main sort of aspects, I think, in terms of delineating or interpreting what that comet might represent. And Rumen said that, these comets can bring in energies that can last, up to 300-400 years on the Earth. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff, and he's an expert in that, so I trust what he says. I'd love to hear his opinion on this one. I hope it's something that brings authenticity and abundance in our heart, and the release of the unconscious dark systems that don't have love in their heart for humanity, whether that's an individual or whether that's a group or whatever it is. The other interesting thing was with this comet, although it was captured on the 3rd of March, it's going to come very close to the Earth, and it will be visible to the eye, according to this individual, on the 20th of April, which is the same time that Jupiter and Uranus form their magical conjunction in Taurus. So I thought that could be a really good omen, you know, to have. Well, I'm hoping so anyway. I don't know enough about comets to make an expert, you know, comment on that, but I'm just hoping that it will bring, ultimately, peace is what I always pray for. Ultimately, peace, and for people to become conscious of their own stuff. See you soon.